moment. But this particular individual has been a member of REACH since birth. She spent the majority of her career as a primary school teacher and an HR professional, and will be soon training as an educational mental health practitioner. So again, in her own words, it's a great pleasure to say hello to Jennie Sands.
Hello, I'm Jennie and I have been a member of REACH since as long as I can remember, which for me is 27 years. And I was born with my right arm cut off just underneath my right elbow, and my left hand was a ball of skin that has been reconstructed to form a working hand. So I don't know if you can see, but I've got some skin grafts there, which are the darker patches of skin, and then I've had 2 toe transplants as well. Now, with my surgery, I won't actually be able to answer any questions because I don't remember. I had them all under 5 and I need to ask my mum first, so sorry about that. But my difference was a surprise to my family, and like with many REACH members' experience, the doctors weren't initially particularly positive or optimistic about what my abilities would be. So they actually told my mum to begin with that I probably wouldn't be able to feed myself, write independently, or even use a computer, which is just mad considering what my life has actually become. Incredibly pessimistic of them. And I have been asked to talk about my career to date and being in a work environment with one arm, which is actually really appropriate because I am just about to start a new career, so I'm going through it all again, which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to be working as an Education Mental Health Practitioner in schools, helping children with mild to moderate health problems, which I'm really, really excited to do, and really is my dream job, and I can't wait to get started. It's in a couple of weeks. But for now, I'm obviously going to be focusing on my previous experience. And my previous experience is I worked and trained as a primary school teacher for 7 years, and I've spent the last 3 in a head office for a chain of nurseries. So it's all been within educational environments. However, obviously my most recent experience, I'm sure, is most applicable to most people in an office rather than in a school. And in terms of my role now in an office, I just want to start off by saying that my experience of working day to day in an office is exactly the same as everyone else's. My colleagues treat me no differently. Obviously, when I started, I remember them having a couple of questions, but now it's almost like they've been completely forgotten. So there's no difference there. And that's my same experience when I was working as a teacher as well. I don't really think any of my colleagues saw me any differently. Just that initial moment of curiosity, and then once they realise you're able, they just, almost forget that you've got one arm, which is great. That's the way we want it. And I actually found that as a teacher, having one arm really benefited me. The management team and the parents of the children that I taught really loved having someone with one arm in the school, because it was a way for me to passively show the children that difference was okay. And so I think that having one arm in a school was actually a real benefit to me, and I know certainly that the parents and the managers really liked that I was there, which was great. However, there are obviously some challenges that come with having one arm in a working environment, and I think a lot of these come from initial first impressions and overcoming the CV stage and the interview stage and battling people's assumptions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So I have had a couple negative experiences while interviewing in relation to my arm. One of them really stands out to me. It was this lady who, in comparison to how she was treating the applicants, was initially very obviously a bit overly polite to me, a little bit patronising, and then outright in the interview she said to me, oh, I see you've got one arm, so how do you use a computer? And initially to me, I don't mind that question. I actually really prefer it when people are honest and a bit more forthcoming with their questions. It's certainly easier to deal with than someone that's just being a bit overly polite to you and you can't really address it. But Yeah, so I just told her, I gave her a couple examples about my experience, but her reaction was, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I didn't even think that you'd be able to do that at all, which was obviously a really rude reaction, meaning to be nice, but it came across as incredibly patronising and rude. And I think that this is the main challenge in life, having one arm, never mind just in the workplace, is that people often put their own perceptions onto me of what they think I should be able to do. So I think a lot of people assume that going around life having one arm is the same as going around in life having a broken arm. And to me, of course, that's not my experience at all. I grew up having one arm, I made my own adaptations, I do things my own way. And to me, actually having two arms would be a disability if I woke up one day and magically had two, because I wouldn't know what to do with it. It would get in the way. I've gotten used to things this way. But people really think that they imagine themselves in my position, and themselves in my position would be that they wouldn't be able to do a lot of things. It would be like having a broken arm, and they wouldn't be able to tie shoelaces or maybe make a cup of tea or use a computer and all of those things. But that's not my lived experience at all, and that is definitely the main challenge in life, but also in the workplace, is just proving to people that you do have these skills and you are capable. However, like I said, I will say that I do think that woman is an exception rather than the main rule. And most experience I have had have been really positive, and people welcome me in the workplace, which is great. And one thing I just want to talk about again in regards to applications is ticking the disability box. The disability box for me is a real point of conflict. For those of you that don't know, a disability box is something you can tick on some companies' applications. Sometimes they have it if they're what we call a disability confident employer. And it means that you can tick the box and you will be fast-tracked to interview. You only need to meet the essential requirements and have a disability. So it's just basically a guarantee that I'll get through to the interview for any job that I apply for. And while this sounds amazing, and I think it is, and I think there is, I'll start by saying there definitely is a reason that this has been put into place. Like I said with that woman, with her perceptions, there are people out there who have a lot of biases, who are unconsciously ableist while they're trying to be polite, and I think that's something we can all relate to when people are met with the unknown. So I do understand that feeling, and this disability box is meant to overcome that, because you go to interview, they meet you, and they see what you're actually capable of. So I think that having this disability box is an incredibly positive thing, and I just want to forerun that before I go on to say what I'm about to say, which is that it really causes a bit of struggle for me to know what to do, because if I see the positive side of it, it's a way to fast track me to the interview of that job, and it's giving me the best chance to get over those assumptions which I just talked about. But on the counter side of it, I feel like if I tick it, will I be seen as the disabled applicant, and is that really what I want to be seen as? And by ticking this box, am I fast tracking my way through applicants that would actually be much better for the job? And will it make me feel like the job wasn't necessarily mine, and that I'm participating in positive discrimination? And so the outcome of that is that I usually never tick the box. I've actually only ever ticked the disability box once, and that was because it was for a job that I just really wanted to get to the interview stage, and I really wanted. But in the end, I didn't even have to go to that interview, because I got the job I got now, which was, is the same position but different counties. So I don't even know what it would be like to go through having ticked the disability box. So if you've got a difference like mine, or even not, I'd really love to know your opinion on this. Am I being too proud, or do you feel the same kind of conflict? Do you understand where I'm coming from? I'd really like to know, because it's something that's been on my mind particularly recently, and I really don't know where I stand on it. I want to be seen as normal and capable by everyone, and recognise my actual abilities rather than getting fast-tracked. But by doing that, am I putting myself at a disadvantage? I don't know. I'd be interested to know what you think. I don't have an answer for that. But I just want to end by saying that I genuinely believe that being born with one arm has had a massive positive benefit on my career. And that is because having one arm has very naturally made me an adaptable, resilient person. You know, I've grown up having to find a way to do my own things independently, to figure things, how best things work out for me without having it necessarily modelled by anyone else. And that's a massive, massive benefit in the workplace, particularly the modern workplace, with everything that's going on at the moment. And if I think of all of my friends that I've made through Reach, a lot of them have got careers which require the same skills. You know, I've got, if I just think of the few of the friends that I've made through this, I've got a friend who's an occupational therapist, I've got a friend who's a social worker, a friend who's an actress, a couple of friends that started their own businesses, and they are all incredibly resilient and empathetic people. And I think a lot of that comes from having one arm. So I think having one arm is a massive benefit in the workplace, in the sense that it gives you the character that you need to succeed. I'd be really interested to know what questions you've got for me. Thank you.
Jennie, thank you so much. That was a great, great video, and we're going to come to your questions and answers in just a second. Just to remind everybody, if you just go to Slido there, which is on the right-hand side of your main page, go to that, and we'd love to hear your questions, as we have done throughout today. But the first thing, Jennie, well, first of all, hello. Lovely to see you. And I love the frankness with which you approached the whole thing of, do you tick the disability box? I think a lot of people will be particularly interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky thing when you feel like you're kind of not in either camp, as I feel a lot of people will with an upper limb deficiency, where you're not quite disabled. I almost don't feel quite disabled enough to take advantages of the lot of things that are out there for people with disabilities, because I'm so able to do most things. And so it is really kind of a point of conflict of how much do I take advantage of, how much am I happy to be seen as disabled, because I do spend, like I said, most of my time trying to convince people that actually I'm perfectly capable and perfectly able. So it is a real feeling of conflict, and I still don't quite know where I fit comfortably within that scale of disabled to differently abled to normal. You know, I hate that term, but it's tricky to place yourself sometimes, and it gets particularly highlighted, I think, when you are applying for jobs and have to disclose your disability. That's always been the time where I've really sort of thought, how do I categorize myself? I don't know. I don't know where I fit.
I know that it's going to be, like many topics that we discuss at Reach, it's going to be very personal, very much down to the individual. Yeah, exactly. And also, of course, it'll change, as you said, you know, for sometimes you will feel differently. We've got lots of questions coming in, so I'm going to crack on straight with that. First of all, we've got somebody saying that their experience with the disability box, when I ticked this, but there was a question, do you consider yourself as disabled? And I said no. Would that have changed your view on it?
I've ticked both in the past, again, depending how I felt. So I've ticked no, I'm not disabled on boxes before, particularly in teaching jobs. I've ticked that I'm not disabled, but then in other ones I felt in the mood like I am. Yeah, it depends really. I think as I'm sitting now, I'm comfortable classifying myself as disabled for a job box, but would I introduce myself to someone as disabled in the street? No, absolutely not. I'm differently abled. So yeah, I think it's a tricky one to answer.
And actually, this is a great question. We all know, we've seen the TV shows where kids say the funniest things, and you know, you can't just predict, you know, there's no filter, they just come out with it. And we've had a question saying, what's the funniest question or the funniest comment you've ever had from one of the children that you've been teaching? You must have a whole catalogue of them.
Yeah, I think I actually wrote some down once. I've got a journal somewhere because they were so fantastic. But my favourite one that always comes to my mind is when I was working with really young children. They were like 4 and 5. And this little boy came up to me and said, "Have you lost your arm?" And I said, "Oh no, I haven't lost it. I was born with it missing." And he took that to mean that it was literally missing and went round the room looking for it in all of the toy boxes and everything, sort of literally looking for, where's her arm gone? Because he just couldn't understand what I meant by that term. And it was just, it was absolutely adorable and hilarious and brilliant.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just fantastic. Kids are just wonderful, and they're honest and sort of unencumbered opinion of you is just so refreshing and lovely. I love working around children.
Okay, so let's come on to some of the other questions we've got here. The one particular person said, "I empathise with you when applying for my daughter's place at nursery." It's going to come up with university later on. Mentioning her in her health conditions, and she actually gave the technical term, which I'm going to try and say, which I got caught up with this last year, I must admit, which is the dactyly, I think it's almost there. And she mentioned that in her health conditions rather than the disability. What's your view about, coming up with more technical details?
I think it can be helpful in certain circumstances. The truth is any definition you give, people are going to Google. The more technical you make it, the more people are going to look it up themselves, I think, and use resources like that. I think it can be really helpful when applying for university, might be in particular, but I personally always choose to use language that I think is accessible to everyone. So when I, on any jobs or on anything, whatever, I've obviously recently applied for university at the moment to go to my current job, I've always put that I'm missing an arm below my right elbow, and I've got a reconstructed left hand. That's the terminology I like to use because I think it's accessible, but I don't think there's any problem with using the technical terms because, like I said, people I think will just Google it nowadays. And
there's lots of support for your comments actually coming in on Slido. Yeah. So thank you all very much at home for coming in with that. Talking about your being at university, your latest career, tell us a little bit about how you made that decision to change careers, because you had a fantastic job, you were doing incredibly well, but you obviously had a calling.
Yeah, I think teaching for me, I absolutely adored it. And when I moved to my office job, I still knew I wanted to work with children, which is why I'm nursery based, and I actually work closely with nursery practitioners. So I'm still never far away from them. But for me, mental health has always had a special place in my heart because of family reasons in particular. But I also think growing up, I've been so incredibly lucky to have such an incredible support system, Reach being one of them, family being others. And I want to be able to support people that don't necessarily have those things, because I just think, like I said, Reach has been a fantastic resource for me, and I want to be another resource to help people, which is why I'm here, but it's also why I want to train to be a mental health practitioner with children.
And actually, funny enough, we're going to be having a panel discussion this afternoon about mental health, such a huge subject at the moment with everything that's going on. How have you reframed your thoughts about mental health given the last 6 months?
Oh, that's a big question. I think it's more important now more than ever that we think about it in particular. I think going back to basics is becoming more and more important, and thinking about, what does self-care mean? What can I do in this time to make sure that I'm staying in touch with people, I think is the hardest thing. I think the one thing COVID has highlighted to us is how important relationships are in keeping us emotionally healthy. And that's been on my mind recently. It's just how can I keep in contact and keep these wonderful webs of social interaction that I've had. And I've been quite lucky. I live in Brighton, so we're pretty low at the moment. We're doing okay. I'm still able to meet up with my friends and things like that. But keeping relationships has been the biggest thing for me during this time, using a lot of Zoom.
and of course, having the Reach. for everybody, having the Reach family on Facebook and through other chats,
Yeah,
and just seeing
exactly.
the sheer volume of chat on the chat box today is
Yeah.
really great, because it means people are staying in touch. I've got a question here from somebody who says, what advice would you give to a small child of 5 years old who receives questions of the missing arm from other children, something short that gives them strength? And that's a question that people will always have, but I like the idea, something really short, a snappy thing. Did you have a standard response?
Yeah, mine was always, I was born with it and I'm fine, or I was born with it and I was born with it and I don't really think about it anymore. It's quite nice. Or I think the key phrase that I always say to young children is, I can do everything you can do. Give me a challenge of something you think I can't do. And then they come up with the weird thing I always used to get is, can you brush your teeth? I was like, how do you brush your teeth? What are you doing?
Use both hands?
Yeah, I know, it's really strange. But no, my snappy response was always just, I was born with it and I can do everything you can do. And, you know, I don't think conversations like that are things you can shut down instantly. But if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. You can pretend you don't hear them. That's something you have to do in a classroom a lot, is if a child pipes up and, interrupts you, you have to pretend that, you didn't hear them, and you'll deal with it later. And you're allowed to do that as well. But yeah, I can do everything you can do.
Now, we've got loads and loads of questions coming. We're going to get through as many as we can, everybody. But if you don't get your question answered, we will take this onto the chat later on. So please do engage with that as well. We've got another question coming in saying, first of all, how much they're appreciating your candour, your straightforwardness and honesty about some of the challenges that you've had and how you've dealt with them. This particular individual is saying, I have an 18-year-old and I worry about how to frame his hand difference when he becomes socially aware, often about having about being a disbelief or not. Do you have any advice for parents of littlies in preparing them for school and being different? So that pre time.
So the time before school.
Yeah.
I think I remember when I went to secondary school and primary school, actually, I think my mum went in and talked to the children about me having one arm. I think even my occupational therapist might have gone in and sort of addressed it and got it out of the way. And I know that was really helpful. And certainly when I was doing supply teaching, so I was in a different class every single day, it would be the first thing I talked about. I would literally do the register and then I would say, obviously you can see I'm a little different. Has anyone got any questions about my arm? And their eyes just lit up, and then they were so excited. It got all of the questions out the way, and then by the time I joined school, nobody was really interested in me having one arm. So I think if you can and you've got the resources, I don't necessarily think you have to go into the school, but I just think asking the reception teacher or your form tutor, if you're going into secondary school, if they're a bit nervous about it, can we have 5 minutes to see if anyone in the class has got any questions or something like that? Because people love the opportunity to get these things sort of airing out the way. It means you're not answering the same question all the time. And it's also a great way to make friends. It gets people talking to you. I remember actually my little sister said to my mum when she started secondary school, but people aren't going to talk to me because they're not going to come up and ask about my arm like they do with Jennie. So it can actually be a huge advantage because it gets people talking to you. So frame it that way.
Thank you so much. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to finish off with a very, very quick final question. Your defence mechanism, if somebody does say something, they're maybe being a bit clumsy with their words and it doesn't come out right and it could be perceived as hurtful, how do you deal with that quickly?
I tend to mirror the language I would prefer back to them. So quite recently I had this actually. It's often the people that often offend me are usually older than me because I feel like they should know better. I'm never really offended by what children say, but like that woman in the interview, for example, I often just model the response I would like back to them. So it's what I think you're asking me is always a good way, I think, to sort of deflect that, because then people often don't mean to offend you. I don't think anyone's genuinely, people are just curious. So yeah, I would say a good term is, what I think you're trying to ask me is, and they often say, oh yeah, sorry.
Brilliant. That's really, really great advice and great way to end. Thank you very much indeed, Jennie Sands. Much appreciated.
Super. Thank you.
Fantastic. And please do keep all those questions coming in. We will get to as many as we possibly can, but of course you can always take it over to the chat box. A huge amount of chit chat going on over here. So thank you very much indeed. And